some progress with that? I mean, are you benchmarking dollar figures? Are you trying to compare? Because the challenging thing with it is the secrecy behind it, right? Like, we don't know what guys are making, we don't know what other schools have because of the competitive part. So, I guess what things are you looking to kind of compare or benchmark?
Yeah, you try to benchmark as much as you can with things that have been said publicly. You're using that. The other thing you're using is when you're talking to your current players and they have good friends at other programs. That's a way to gain some information. When you hire new staff, one of the best things I think we do is we do a new staff questionnaire when I hire people after they've been on campus for about a month. I interview them about a ton of subjects. They have to fill out this paperwork. So you're able to gain information like that from people you hire, come from other programs, and getting specific information. You have some people that you may compete with. More times not, you find programs that you're not really competing with, that you have very significant relationships with on their staff, and you can ask them directly what exactly is happening. And then obviously, you hear a lot in recruiting. Obviously, to your point, a lot of these things are verbal, but you can learn a lot through talking to a lot of different resources, whether it's high school coaches or trainers or parents or prospects as well, to get a pretty good understanding of what is happening nationally. And then, as you guys know too, some of our current players were offered opportunities, and I say this because it's happening all over college football, where our players after the season were contacted, from other programs to transfer, and were offered, deals. So there's a lot of ways to get that information.
Did you think they were going to go? Were you nervous for a second that you were going to lose some guys because of it?
Yeah, I think, obviously before the transfer portal opened back up, everybody in the country was concerned what that was going to look like. But we had a ton of conversations with our players. I think, although we've had some challenges in the NIL space, I do think there's a ton of respect from our players and how we have handled things. And I think there's been some examples of maybe places that were very aggressive early on, which is good, but also if not handled well, it could cause you some real issues in your locker room too.
One of your former players has been in the news a lot recently, and I think Saquon Barkley. I'm not sure if you have any thoughts on his contract situation and negotiations, but I'm more so wondering why you think there's such a discrepancy for how high running backs are valued in college football, especially at programs like yours where so many good running backs have played, versus their decreasing value at the NFL level.
Yeah, I talked to Saquon probably 3 days ago. Had a really good conversation. Me and my wife had a really good conversation with Saquon this summer over break. A lengthy conversation, which to be honest with you, we've had a lot of conversations, but not a conversation like that in a long time. So that was really good. I want to be a resource for Saquon and his family, not just during his playing career, but really for the rest of his life. I'm a big fan of his and big supporter of his. All that other stuff with the NFL, I'm not going to worry about that or get into that. He was able to sign a pretty good one-year deal, and I think he's going to have a big year for the Giants, and I think he's going to continue to be one of their better leaders in the locker room and representatives in the community too.
What's back to NIL? What advantage do you think it is to have the collective association where the private value United is working with those other competing collectives from other schools?
Yeah, I think back to Audrey's point a little bit about best practice, so those collectives are all able to share information with each other as well, because that's one of the big challenges, right? You don't necessarily know exactly what everybody's doing. There's no website to go pull up to find, the exact information. So being a part of a group like that, I think there's some advantages.
What's the feeling on Drew Aller, and what does he have to do to reach it?
So you're talking about our quarterback position and the competition that's going on?
I'm just talking about one of those guys.
Oh, okay. Yeah, Drew's a talented guy. He was ranked based on who you talk to, some people had him as a 5-star, some people as the #1 recruit in the country. 6'5", 242 pounds, can make a ton of throws. Is more athletic than people realize. He lives the position. Really works at it both in the classroom and on the football field. He's changed his body composition. He's stronger, more athletic than he was, and he played in 10 games last year. But for me to sit here and talk about his ceiling when he hasn't started a game in college football is hard to say. I will tell you that probably the thing I was most impressed with last year was his poise when he did get in games. You saw him in the Purdue game. We opened the season, prime time, blackout, conference game, and he got in there and he just looked poised and confident. And all those other things you can develop and train, that's something that's hard to develop and train. You either have that or you don't, and he had it. And he has it.
As NIL evolves, what do you think that next era could or
If I knew he was going to ask a question about NIL, I would have came to you. Yeah.
As it evolves, what do you think the next era could or should look like as far as player compensation, control of your own roster? What do you think that next era might look like?
Yeah, I think everybody understands that college football has changed, and the college football that maybe we grew up with is gone and never coming back. And to be honest with you, I think in a lot of ways that is good. But what I also think this NIL has done, in my mind, has shown how complex these issues that the NCAA has been dealing with a long time and gets a lot of criticism based on rules and enforcement. And sometimes it's fair, the criticism that they've gotten. But the issues are more complex than people realize. And how do you do all these things? How do you do all these things at the NCAA level and then really have the ability to enforce the rules you say that we're supposed to be living by? How much do you need states or federal government to get involved and help with these things? It went to the Supreme Court, and we saw how that went. I think it was 9-0. So, I'm still a big believer in the NCAA. I'm still a big believer in our model, but the model needs to change and the model needs to evolve. And the reality is we need to get all these people in the room at the same time, because I think you're seeing a bunch of bills, you're seeing a bunch of good ideas, and I think all of them warrant consideration, and there may be a good idea in them. But the reality is we got to need to merge all the good ideas and find something that it's not going to be perfect for everybody, but it shouldn't be, right? It should be what's in the best interest of the student athletes, what's in the best interest of colleges and college athletics, and find something that everybody can be comfortable with and agree on. But the most important thing, we got to get a bunch of people in the room together and have those discussions with legal representation and all of it. So we're talking about things that are actually realistic and doable.
From your standpoint, in this era of player movement, what is the most difficult thing or biggest challenge of recruiting someone like Drew, who plays behind Sean for a whole year, and keeping him in school?
Well, I think it starts with transparent, honest, real conversations with people. I think if you try to sell people on something that may or may not be realistic, then you're going to have a hard time. I think if you're really transparent, it's kind of like for us, like when kids call to commit, we try to talk them out of it. Like some schools pressure kids to commit and then they decommit and they're upset. I'm upset because I tried to talk you out of committing us in the first place to make sure that this was real. I think it's the same thing with the transfer portal. You got to talk about it. You got to talk about it with your players. You got to talk about it with the parents. Everybody knows, the worst thing you can do in most things in life is the path of least resistance. So being able to have honest conversations about what that looks like for everybody involved, more times than not, I think I think you're going to like the results and you're going to respect it, and so will they. But if you sell them on something that's not realistic, and then they come and it ends up not being realistic, you kind of put yourself in that situation on your own.
How much more of your time now is spent dealing with off-the-field stuff, handling off-the-field stuff than 5 or 10 years ago?
Well, I think that's always really been the challenge with college football. We wear more hats than the NFL, right? Whether it's recruiting or whether it's fundraising, whatever it may be. Now, NIL and everything else, transfer portal, so on and so forth. A lot. That's why, to be honest with you, you can make the argument, being an offensive coordinator or being a defensive coordinator and staying in that, or as a position coach and staying true to why you fell in love with coaching in the first place. Because when you become a head coach, a lot of times it almost forces you to pull away from some of those things that got you into the profession in the first place, unless you're at a place that has such strong infrastructure with all the other things, which there's very few places that are like that, but the infrastructure is so strong in all the other areas that you're allowed to focus the majority of your energy on coaching and developing the kids.
Is that how you keep those lost hours how do you keep those lost hours from impacting the on-field progress?
Well, I guess it's like anything else, right? There's a time and place for everything. So you got to understand, okay, this is spring ball, all that other stuff goes away. That, if other people are going to take on those responsibilities, that's fine, but that goes away, and this is my focus right now. Spring ball ends, I got a couple weeks. Now I'm going to start to focus on these other aspects of the program that need to happen. So you got to try to compartmentalize as much as you can. There's going to be certain times a year where you're juggling a lot of things at the same time, but at the end of the day, let's make sure that we're keeping the main thing, which I don't care what anybody says, is still getting a great education and playing big-time football. And the programs and the players that lose sight of that, they're in trouble.
The new TV deal, how do you think it's impacting the league? How do you think it's impacting Penn State?
Yeah, to be honest, I don't spend a whole lot of time on those things. I do recognize that we're fortunate to be in the Big Ten. There's two real conferences that I think are built in a way not only to be the most successful, but be able to sustain it long term. We're fortunate to be in one of those conferences. But besides that, really, all of my focus and energy is on what do I got to do for Penn State to put us in the best position to be successful and to represent Penn Staters everywhere the right way, both on and off the field.
How was Marcus settled in at Penn State? I know it's early, still in Canada, but were you pleased with your early development in terms of deadlines?
Yeah, I love Marcus. We've been fortunate. I take a lot of pride in hiring people and recruiting people. I think it's the most important thing we can do is bring the right people into our building. And Marcus, is first class person, both on and off the field, as a husband, as a father. He's got an unbelievable family. Was a great player. He's had a really good coaching career, and he's come in and really adjusted well. His players love him. He's recruiting at a high level. I saw development this spring. Obviously, we need to take a big step this training camp, and I think between the work that he's put in and the strength staff has put in and the players have put in, as well as some of the new talent coming in either from high school or the transfer portal, I think we're in a position where the discussion is who's the third wideout, right? Well, to me, in my mind, it's changed from the spring where it was who's the third wideout. It's really who's the third wideout, and also who are the guys that are going to be in the two deep to give us a legitimate two deep of guys that we can win with in the Big Ten. And I think the reality is those two things in some ways they're both going to answer those two questions, because I think there's a group of about 4 or 5 guys that all are legitimately competing whether they're second-year guys or third-year guys in the program that are ready to take that next step and be real guys, and they showed flashes of it this spring, or guys that transferred in. So it's not just who's going to be the starter in that third position, but also who are going to be the backups, at all three spots too.
Is the second tight end still an option for that wide receiver 3?
Oh yeah, we're going to play the best guys. So not only are they competing with the wide receivers in that room, they're competing with the tight ends, and our tight end room is as good as any tight end room in the country. So we're going to play 12 personnel. It all comes down to how camp goes with our 11 personnel in terms of, are we 50-50? Are we 60% 11 personnel and 40%, or vice versa, based on what room gives us the best chance to be successful? The thing that's good about our tight end room is it's not like if we go to 2 tight ends, we have to be in traditional tight end sets. That second tight end can play slot receiver and do almost all the same things those wide receivers can. So I think your point is a really good one. That competition is really with those 2 rooms. Well, Rob's on offense. Yeah, Rob's on offense. I think there's a ton of value of having defensive guys in the offensive room and offensive guys in the defensive room in that analyst role. Again, so you have different perspectives and lenses on how we look at things. And the reality is offensive guys and defensive guys look at the game very differently. So there's a ton of value of having that perspective in the room. Ola, as we all know, especially the people that cover Penn State closely, Ola did a great job when he was the defensive coordinator at Villanova. A lot of people that I know from the DMV that thought very highly of him. So he's a guy I've been kind of tracking for a while. And then Danny, as you guys know, Danny played for me as a quarterback. Been in the CFL for a number of years. Danny was the ACC Rookie of the Year. He understands how we do things. He understands how our culture and how I'm wired and how we think. And I think he's a rising star in the profession. I really do. And we work really hard at following the rules. So by being able now under the new GA provisions to move him from an analyst to a GA, allowing him to coach and kind of be able to take those restraints off of him is going to be not only valuable for Danny and his development, but for our quarterbacks and really for our offense as a whole.
I have kind of a two-part question about Marvin Harrison Jr.
It's good.
Yes. One, who does he remind you of? And two, when you're preparing for him, what do you tell your assistant coaches and what do they tell your defensive back?
Yeah, so who he reminds me of, that's hard for me to say. Obviously, he's one of the more talented receivers, if not the most talented receiver in college football. So that's already a pretty impressive thing to say about any player in college football. He's also obviously an impressive young man, and it comes from an impressive family. So what he's been able to do is special. But I think, what are you trying to do in terms of when you're playing against him? Like most people, you're trying to identify who their best player is, who's their most impactful player, and you're trying to limit their production as much as you possibly can and force another player or another area of the offense to beat you. So for example, if you have Nick Singleton and Katron Allen as your running backs, I would think most defenses are going to say, we're going to load the box, take the runaway based on numbers, and force a first-year starting quarterback to beat us. We're not going to allow the proven commodity to beat us. Does that make sense? Now, that's easier said than done. So that'll be a challenge, and we're looking forward to that challenge. That's why you play in the Big Ten. That's why you come to places like Penn State to play these types of games against these types of opponents.
James, talking about one of your tight ends, so what did Khalil Dinkins show you over spring practice and then throughout the summer too, and how has he grown in the time he's been at Penn State?
Yeah, Khalil, I think Khalil could be one of these guys that we're talking about a lot more in Game 5 that we're not talking about now. One of those breakout players that people are excited about, where he's made a couple big plays in games and people are now talking about him and his future. He is big, he is strong, he is fast, and he's matured a ton since he's been on campus and really over the last year. And that's all of it. That's football-wise. He's gotten bigger. He was a little bit undersized up to this point. He's now got the size on, and it's the right size, so he's still as fast and as explosive as he's been. We take a lot of pride in tight end and we take a lot of pride at Penn State in our tight ends being, complete tight ends, not big wideouts, which they are at a lot of places. But I think you guys are going to be impressed the more you get to see Khalil, not only in practice but in games in competitive environments. I think you guys will see him very similar to how we have felt about Tyler Warren, for the last year.
James, as sports gambling become more prevalent in society, what challenges does that pose for a coach?
I wish if you guys could put up signs of what questions you're going to ask before I look at you, so I can decide whether I want to go to you. Yeah, I think, look, here's the reality. These things that we have now in college athletics that we either didn't have before or are more prominent than they've ever been, then we better be aware of that. We can't put our head in the sand. We better have programming on these things and have these discussions and educate our players and our fan base about it. It's important. And to me, in all of these things, there's an opportunity, right? There's an opportunity to have a healthy discussion about what these things mean, not only in society, but also in our program. And then also about choices, right? There's choices that we all make every day, and trying to equip your guys with the information to make the best choices on a daily basis.
For young guys like Nick Singleton and also Abdul Carter on the defensive side, younger guys that had success last season, what's the biggest challenge, the biggest step that you think needs to be taken, not just in the offseason, but also in the camp, to take another big step going forward next year?
Well, I think it's kind of be a strange answer, but I would say is patience. And what I mean by that is I meet with all the freshmen multiple times about the redshirting process. And none of them want to redshirt. They all think they should play. But what I'm trying to eliminate as well is at the end of the year, you wanted to play, but then when you look back at the year, it wasn't necessarily worth it based on the amount of reps you played, especially now that you can play 4 games plus postseason and still keep your red shirt. So I think you got to be very strategic about that. So having guys this year that are going to be able to come in and play, being able to recognize who those guys are as quickly as possible, then come up with a strategy of how we're going to use them. Use them early in those 4 games to say, okay, they're ready, let's keep playing them. Or let's shut them down and save a few games for late in the season for injuries. Those things, I think, are really important, how to recognize them. And then guys last year that had success, how do they take the next step, right? Hopefully we have as many freshmen in this class that impact our team like last year, because those guys had a significant, impact on our season. Did I answer your question?
Yeah, just trying to make that jump from year 1 to year 2 and how much of a difficulty it could be to obviously try to grow from that, right?
Yeah, it's difficult, but what you're hoping as well is this freshman class that comes in is putting the heat on them from behind, that they feel that pressure to keep growing, that they don't become complacent and feel like I've arrived based on what I've done last year. But we also have a program as coaches that we're very transparent about where they're at and what they need to do. And we do have enough competition within the program that if you're not doing your job every single day, someone's going to take it.
There's like a baseline thing you set for that then, right?
Sir?
There isn't like a baseline thing that obviously like a goals, objectives that you want to set.
No, we're not a big goals objective program. We'll talk about things obviously in preseason. Okay, what do you guys want to do? Everybody says, oh, we want to be back here. I get it. That's great. But we spend most of our time doing the things to get here rather than sitting around in a room coming up with those words you used.
Two more guys.
James, do you view Ohio State
Step up to replace Tig.
That's what I'm going to do for now. I'm going to let you guys talk, try to listen to what both of your questions are and say, okay, I don't want that question. I'm going here. I'll come back.
James, how have you seen Keaton step up to replace Tig both on and off the field?
I think the fortunate thing, like when I set up on the stage, we have guys that we got to replace in the secondary. They're huge guys, Tig and obviously Joey Porter. But we played so many guys in the secondary so that it's not like there's a question mark there, but there's guys that can step into that role that have played a ton of football. You know, the thing with Keaton, I would say, Keaton's played a ton of football at Penn State. He really started out as a playmaker who could play wide receiver or defensive back. And although he's had a ton of success and played a lot of games, that playmaking is not what we thought it was going to be the first couple of years. This spring, I saw that from him. Those skills that he had as a wide receiver in high school, I saw that coming back. I saw him playing fast and making plays. And really, he's done all the things necessary except that. More playmaking, which is really what Tig brought, right? That guy just made so many plays. The ball loved him, whether it was interceptions, fumble recoveries, whatever it may be. That's what we're going to need from Keaton. You know what you're going to get. He's mature, he's steady, he's smart, he's athletic. Now we need him to make those plays to close that gap with what we've talked about in replacing Tig's production.
James, do you view Ohio State as a rival, and are you disappointed at all that Penn State won't play Ohio State every year going forward?
Yeah, I think I kind of look at those teams in our conference as really good teams that we've competed with for a long time and have had great games. To me, that word is different. I think there seems to be a lot of people trying to create those things. And it's funny, when I first got to Penn State, they were having this discussion about unrivaled. Well, why? Well, we're not an original Big Ten team. We were independent for a long time. Then you join the conference, and then people try to create rivalries that really weren't there. Just like everybody wanted to tell me about our rivalry with Pitt, which I agree with geographically, but literally up till we played them a few years ago, none of our players had ever even seen a Penn State-Pitt rivalry game in their lifetime. So I just think these games are important. They're big games. They're important for the Big Ten. They're important for our teams individually as well. But to me, there shouldn't have to be discussions on is this team is a rival or not. If they're a rival, everybody knows they are, in my opinion.
Thank you, Coach.
Thank you.
Thanks.